Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back. Today we're going to be expanding on yesterday's topic with const and let, getting into primitives and objects in JavaScript. And we're going to talk again a little bit about primitives and objects and how their data gets passed around. Because the two don't interact the same way, just like we talked about yesterday, where there's a little bit of a difference between how primitives and objects exist and how the JavaScript world deals with that. All right, so let's just jump right in. Let's open up some code that I have prepared and let's start drawing this out. What color should I use? I think the colors will show up better today. Let's try the green. Green. So account 1, I'm just going to, for simplicity's sake, just use A for account, okay? So we have your code in the top left, and A1 is equal to the string of Drew. And the string is just a set of characters, and this is the primitive that I was talking about, right? And it's let, so this is unlocked. I'm able to change this later. And account 2, that's set to equal to account 1. So what happens here? And I'm just going to tell you, okay? A2 says I'm going to set it equal to whatever A1 has. So it goes and looks, says, okay, what do you got? Okay, you have a string of Drew. I'm going to copy that over here. So there's actually 2 strings of Drew now. Two primitives, okay? So when we see what's happening on line 3 over here, and we say account 1 and account 2, and we log that out, we say account 1 is Drew, and account 2 is also Drew. All right? So on line 6, we also say, are they the same? Okay? And you might expect, or you might just intuitively think, yeah, they're the same. Drew, that you can even go character by character, which is what JavaScript is doing. It's saying DREW, DREW. Both strings, both exactly the same. True, they are the same. Now, what if, remember, account 1 is let. We change account 1's data to D, another primitive. And if we log out account 1 and account 2, sure enough, we get D and Drew. It's exactly what we expected, right? So, are they the same? No, they're not. Character for character, they are not the same. They have different characters, okay? That's primitives in JavaScript. And that's how, notice that we had A2 equal to A1, right? And it copied the value. That's what I'm trying to say. That's what's important. And that's for primitives. Objects, which we're going to look at right now, operate differently. And you might notice that the name of the file is called reference. That's a clue. So let's draw this out. We got A1. And we set that to an object, right? This is not a primitive. An object is, you can tell it's an object by that curly bracket. And then we have a key, name, colon, value, string of Drew. It's pretty much the same thing, except this is an object. Okay? Now we have A2, and we set that to A1, just like we did with the primitive. All right, so I'm going to do this the wrong way first, okay? Just so you know. What happened last time is we said, hey, A1, what do you have? Okay, cool, you've got an object with one property in it with a name and Drew. I'm going to copy it. This is what we did last time, right? That's a curly bracket. Promise. Name. Drew. Okay? So when you console log account 1 and account 2, you get name and Drew. so far it looks like I did it right? Everything works. But now I'm going to change the name property here. That's on line 6. If you look at my code, I'm saying account1 dot. So we go into the curly bracket dot, and we set the name equal to something different. We're changing the value to D. Right? That's what you think's happening. Okay? We're all in agreement, right? That's what's happening. Now on line 8, console log, and we say account1 is the object name D, and account2, wait a minute. It says that it's name D, and we have name Drew. So that's weird, right? Wasn't expecting that. So that's the wrong way to do it. That's right. We couldn't predict what was going to happen, right? So objects behave differently. So let's start over and do it the right way. A1 is creating an object, just like before, with a key of name, value of Drew, string. And then A2, and let's say that there's a reference, right? Okay. It's pointing at this object, which exists in memory somewhere on your computer. And the variable account1 is just saying, hey, I know where this exists in memory, and I'm going to point to that, right? There's actually, you could think about it like this box right here, this object literal, has an address in memory. And the A1 knows where that address is, okay? So on line 2, we say, all right, let's make a new variable, account2, and it's equal to account1. And the address of what account1 is set to is this object. So now, again, account2 is pointing to the same object. So it's not copied, it's referenced. That's the key difference. With primitives, the value was copied over. You got 2 strings of Drew, if you remember. But with objects, there's only one object gets created in memory, and then the variables get referenced to that object. Okay? So now when we go through, everything still makes sense, right? So if when we on line 3, we console log account1 and account2, both of them are the same object. And then when we change the account1 name property to D, and we console log, both account1 and account2 are the same object, and this time it's D. All right? So that's actually what's happening. And that's how objects get referenced and passed around. And there's a lot of passing around objects in JavaScript. That's very important to know. Happens a lot. That is not something that is rare. Okay, so let's have a little thought experiment because it's fun. Let's say we have account 1. This is my Netflix account, by the way. And we have the same object. Right? And then we set account 1, and all of a sudden my account gets taken over by my girlfriend. And instead of being assigned to D, A1, and by the way, this is let, which lets us assign it to a completely new object that we just made, right? So on line 2, we're creating a completely new object, right? With a completely new address, you could say, in memory, with name of my girlfriend, D. Okay? And this right here is gone. It's reassigned to a completely different object because this isn't const. If this were const, we would not be allowed to make that reference. That's why this is let. We talked about that yesterday. I don't want to get sidetracked with that, but you should watch the video I made yesterday. Okay. So now the question is, what happens to this object that has no arrows pointing to it? This guy right here. What happens to that guy? Don't know. I could make a guess. I read in a blog post that JavaScript knows that it's not referencing anything, and JavaScript is smart enough to know that, oh yeah, you know what, I'm just going to delete this because no one's using it. It's just taking up memory. It's just sitting there. You know, why keep it around? And that's called garbage collecting. Taking out the garbage. My account got taken over and garbage collected. Okay? So that's just something interesting to think about. When you have objects that aren't referenced by anything, there might as well just not be existing. They don't exist. Right? So now before, if you remember, we talked about strings being equal to the other string. And we said, yep, Drew, that string Drew is equal to that other string Drew over here, right? I'll just show you right here on line 6. We say string Drew is equal to string Drew, and we got true. All right, so now we're going to talk about equality in objects. And again, there's a big difference here. Let's see what color. Pink did not work out too well. Let's do green. So let's do it. Account 1. We're creating an object, right? Name Drew. And account 2. Name D. Those are strings, all right? And you both have arrows pointing to each one of these objects. So these are 2 objects, right? And both objects exist in memory in different places. They both have different addresses, you could say. So when you say, is account 1 equal to account 2? Obviously it's not, right? They even have different names, Drew and D. But what if we change A1 to be D? Are you ahead of me on this? It's still false. So why is this? It seems to be the same exact text, right? The same properties, same key value pairs, but they're not equal to each other. That's just how JavaScript works. So really what I'm trying to say is that if you have an empty object, right? Even if there's nothing in it, you can do that, right? You can have an empty object in JavaScript, totally fine. But that's an object in memory. And let's create another completely empty object. You can do that, just like I said. And that has its own place in memory. It's 2 objects. And are they exactly the same? Well, they're different objects in different places in memory. So they're not the same object. So it's not not exactly the same as itself. It's 2 different things. They're in 2 different places. So JavaScript goes, these aren't the same, even though they look exactly the same, which is confusing. And let's remember that with strings, with primitives, this is not the case, right? So before, when we were looking at Drew as a string, and we said, is that the same as Drew? That's true. This is false. And you can see that on line 9. Okay? So if we take A1 and we say, is that equal to itself, right? We're not looking at A2 at all. We're only looking at A1. And if you compare A1 to itself, it's the same object. So that's true. And then on line 16, remember how strings equal, other strings. So if you actually just took the characters themselves of an object, this is an object. This is a complex thing. When JavaScript looks at that, it goes, that's an object, you know? It's not just a curly bracket character and another curly bracket character. You mean an object, and that's special to JavaScript. But if you take what curly brackets that looks like an object, right? And you say, I'm just going to put some quotes around it. Now it's no longer a JavaScript object. It's just two characters of curly brackets in a string primitive, just like Drew was. Okay? And if you set that equal to another set of string characters that just look like an object, that is going to be true. Those are the same because it's a primitive now. And what I have at the bottom on that last line, let's scroll down. There's a way to convert objects into strings by using a special syntax. You don't really have to understand it, it's not important, but JSON.stringify will basically do exactly this to the object. But there can be actual data inside, right? So at this point, it's just what JSON.stringify is doing to account 1 is just putting little ticks next to account 1 and account 2. So these are now primitives. And they're saying, well, now if you compare them, they're just primitive strings and they're just characters, right? And they've got the exact same characters. So they're equal. It's true. I hope that made sense. That's all I wanted to talk about today. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned something. I hope it was helpful. Have a great one. I need a new paper towel. This is the second time I recorded this video.